Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One-to-One. Despite all the raging debate and rancor over the Affordable Health Care Act, many New Yorkers are rather casual about their own health. We live in a city with a remarkable range of health care options, from private doctors and walk-in clinics to teaching hospitals and medical research facilities. Even so, there's still a shortage of doctors here, and many of them are getting poached by other states that offer higher salaries, more up-to-date facilities, and the promise of more funding for research. Jo Wiederhorn, President and CEO of the Associated Medical Schools of New York, will explain how that happens and what her organization is trying to do about it. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Your organization is a consortium of the 16 medical schools
Correct.
in New York State. So there's 16 in New York. How many nationwide?
Well, now they are actually, for the first time in many years, they've been approving and accrediting new medical schools. So over the past 5 years or so, the number of medical schools has increased from about 135 to 147.
Really? That's all there are in the nation?
Yes, that's all there are.
And New York has 16 of them.
Yes.
And how many medical students does New York State have compared to medical students nationwide?
We have about 10,000 in all 4 years of what we call undergraduate medical education.
Mm-hmm.
Undergraduate medical education is actually the 4 years of medical school.
Right.
Graduate medical education is the residency.
Right.
So in undergraduate medical education, we have about 10,000 students. It's about 10% of the nation's medical students. And about 17, we train in New York about 17% of the nation's residents.
Okay, so in terms of new doctors each year, how many does New York State produce?
We produce about 2,500 each year.
Okay. There are some professions that have been getting smaller in size in recent years. Law school, for example, fewer applications to law school because law school graduates are having a harder time getting work. But the medical profession seems to be booming.
Well, yes and no. Medical schools, for a number of years, there are always these studies that say whether or not we need more doctors, if there's going to be a doctor shortage or there's going to be a glut of doctors. So in the 1980s, the national organization that represents medical schools had asked that medical schools not expand because at that point they had been thinking that there were going to be too many physicians out in the workplace. Then in the late 1990s, early 2000s, everybody was saying, oh, there's going to be a doctor shortage. So now medical schools are expanding. So the number of medical students, the undergraduates, are actually expanding, but the residency slots, which are paid for through federal Medicare spending, they're staying stagnant.
Okay.
So as the number of medical students graduate, the number where they can continue on to do their post-training is staying the same.
That's interesting. I had no idea that the federal government paid for residency slots.
Yes, they pay out of Medicare. Hospitals that train residents get an additional piece put onto their reimbursement rate in order to train residents. Okay.
Now, 16 medical schools, I mean, who knew that the state had 16 medical schools? Are they all pretty much the same model, or do they differ significantly in size and demographics and focus?
Well, they do differ significantly. So of the 16, there are 4 of them that are state schools run by SUNY. There's one that is actually run by CUNY. It's a BSMD program. So those
is that a city college?
City college.
Yeah.
Oh, Sophie Davis, actually.
Okay.
Sophie Davis College of Biomedical Science and Education.
But is that attached to City College?
It's attached to City College.
Okay.
And it takes students right out of high school and puts them through the undergraduate school, regular undergraduate school, plus the first 2 years of medical school. And then they transfer to one of the other, what they call coordinating schools.
Okay.
And they do their clinical work at one of the other 5 schools that they have, 5 medical schools that they have their arrangements with. It cuts a year off of their medical school training.
Right.
And it's a lot less expensive.
And I noticed there's several schools of, I think, osteopathic medicine?
Yes, there are 2 osteopathic schools and 16 and 14.
And how does osteopathic differ from other?
It came from a different branch of medicine. Osteopathic schools look at systems, and they look at, traditionally, they've looked more at systems, body systems, how the skeleton works with the muscles, and much more so than traditionally, and this is all changing these days, but traditionally how allopathic medical schools have looked at, like, microbiology and the impact of cells, and that is much more basic science oriented than osteopathic.
Okay. So when did your organization get started, and why?
Well, it actually got started in the late 1960s, and it was originally the Metropolitan Council, I believe, of medical schools, which included schools in New Jersey and Connecticut and New York City. And the intent was because a lot of what happens in medical education is medical research, and a lot of medical research uses animal models. So the intent was to originally have shared animal facilities that all of these schools could use together. That actually never happened. So in the late 70s, the organization changed, and it became an association of just New York State medical schools. And since then, we have two major focuses. One of them is advocacy, mainly in Albany, a little bit in Washington, and diversity, trying to increase the number of diverse students in medical school itself.
What do you mean by diversity?
Well, traditionally, we've used the federal definition of diversity. African American, Hispanic, Native Puerto Ricans. But now it's really becoming more diversity and inclusion. So it also includes LGBT people and other types, I'm sorry, that's not a good word, but other groups of people who are not usually represented within medical education.
Probably not talking about women, because something like almost close to half medical students are women now?
Yes. Actually, in some schools, over half them.
Really?
Yes, because especially when the financial industry was booming, men were going into finance.
That's true. Same thing happened with journalism, which used to be predominantly males. Then the men started going into investment banking and whatever, and a lot more women came into journalism, because men go to where the money is.
That's right. That's right. And women go to the more altruistic.
Right, right. So basically your organization, you comprise the deans of the 16 medical schools, right?
Yes.
How does New York, in terms of diversity, how does New York State compare to other states?
Actually, we do very well, which is not to say we do good, but compared to other states, we're doing very well. We have actually been running from our organization diversity programs since 1985. The AAMC, the national organization, set a goal in the 1990s to have 3,000 by 2000, meaning that there would be 3,000 underrepresented individuals within medical school nationwide by the year 2000. Unfortunately, the nation didn't meet that goal, but we began doing diversity programs at that point. Well, actually a little bit earlier. We got support from Senator Laval, who represents Long Island, and Assemblyman Ives, who was representing Buffalo at the time. And they started a program for high school students called the Science Technology Entry Program. And 10 of our medical schools participate in that. And then we started in 1995. We're just going to have our 25th anniversary. So I guess 1990, a post-baccalaureate program. And this program is unique. It's always been very unique in the country. Now there are a couple that have imitated pieces of it. But this program was to increase the pipeline of students who go to medical school, underrepresented students who go to medical school.
And is it partly for students who didn't make it into medical school their first try?
That's exactly who it's for. The process is that the students have to apply to medical school, and they have to have enough of a resume and a background that the medical school brings them in for an interview. And then the admissions committee looks at the students and says, you know, this student, I'm sure this student could be a fantastic physician, but needs a year of academic enrichment, or didn't take the basic courses that you really need in order to be successful in medical school, or didn't do quite well enough on the MCAT, which is the entrance exam. So the school would then refer those students to the University at Buffalo, where we run our post-bac program, where the students would have a year of individualized educational support, whether it be through mentoring or research or biophysics or organic chemistry. And if the student got a B or better in every one of his or her classes, the school that referred them had to take them.
I see.
So it really, that was new. There was nothing like that in the country.
And how many students go through that?
Well, 25 students go through that each year.
Wow. That's kind of hard to get into, too.
Yes, that is also very difficult to get into. And the thing that really, because the intent was to increase the pipeline, if you were accepted into this program, you know, kids apply to numerous medical schools at one time. So if you're accepted into this program, if you were accepted by any other medical school, you couldn't go to our program.
I see.
Because the intent was we want to expand this to kids who otherwise would not be able to go.
So if we're looking at the diversity level in New York State, if we're looking at the African American, Latino, and Puerto Rican students in New York State medical schools, what rough percentage are we looking at?
About 13%.
Okay.
Which does not meet the population at all. If I could just expand on that a little bit, because in 2008 we had our funding doubled by the state because we were doing so well with that program. And at that time...
The funding for the baccalaureate program.
For the baccalaureate program. And at that time we started 3 new post-bac programs, which also provide master's degrees.
Okay.
So those students, even if they don't get into medical school, and 93% of them do get into medical school, but they at least come out with
a master's degree, and they can take it and do something else with it.
Right.
You know, I hear people talk about, you know, college students who are pre-med. What are the basic courses? And organic chemistry, obviously.
Yes.
What are the others that you have to pretty much take for
organic chemistry, physics? We do have students in our post-bac programs who have been music majors or have been humanities majors instead. So those students definitely have not taken any of the real science courses, physiology, those sorts of courses.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with more with Joe Wiederhorn, president of the Associated Medical Schools of New York, after this message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Joe Wiederhorn, president of the Associated Medical Schools of New York. So we talked about the post-bac program as one of the pipeline programs you get people into medical school. Tell me about the STEP program, which is for high school students, correct?
Right. That program is for kids from underserved areas, either educationally or economically, and who are underrepresented in medicine. Each of the schools have a different program. So we have 10 schools that have programs, and each of them are slightly different. So for instance, at Downstate Medical School, the students there are paired up with the Arthur Ashe Institute. And students enter when they're in 10th grade, and there's a set cohort of students. They come in 10th grade, and they do the program in 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And then a new set of students come in when the 12th graders graduate, and they are also paired up with Arthur Ashe, and they go through the program that way, which is very different than, for instance, the program that we have at Buffalo. And the program at Buffalo includes students who are in 7th and 8th grade. They do research projects, build robots, and learn about what it is to be a doctor. That they may follow physicians around. They may work in laboratories.
Is it a summer program, or is it something that they do in addition to the regular school year, but at the medical school?
Every program is an academic year program, and some of them also have summer components. And it just depends on the school and how they've structured the program.
Is there a program aimed at college students who are in college?
Yes, those are called C-STEP programs, and they're college science technology entry programs. We don't run any of those, or we don't oversee any of those. Those are overseen by individual universities, not necessarily medical schools.
Okay, okay. Now, I assume that anyone can take it's the MCAT, right?
Right.
At any point in time. So presumably if one does well on that and also has successfully completed certain pre-med courses, then one's chances of getting accepted into med school are still 1 in 20. No.
Yes, that's about right. Well, maybe 1 in 100.
1 in 100.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What is the acceptance rate for medical schools these days?
Oh, the acceptance rate is unbelievable. New York Medical College, for instance, had 11,000 applicants for 193 slots. A school like Columbia will have 7,000, 8,000 applicants for 170 slots. Mm-hmm. There's just very many more people who want to go to medical school than there are slots for.
Do you still have medical students going out of the country, to the Caribbean and places like that to go to medical school?
Yes, there are medical students. There are students who do go to the Caribbean and to offshore medical schools, as well as students who go to medical schools, for instance, the University of Bologna, right, or a school in England or Spain. We certainly understand that students do this, given how many people really would like to become doctors and how many actually can become within our system. We always say to people, be sure that the school that you go to is accredited mm-hmm. by an organization that has national or international standing. And that really is the best way to go to medical school if you can't get into a school here, right, is to find an accredited, well thought of medical school. Okay.
How much does medical school cost? I almost hate to ask.
Yes, it's very expensive. Medical school these days will cost, on an average at the CUNY schools, about $40,000 a year. And at the private schools, it'll cost probably about $48,000-$50,000.
Okay, well, that's not bad as I thought, but that's just tuition.
That's tuition, room and board, books.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's...
Okay. What percentage of medical students are on getting some kind of financial aid? Are most of them?
Most of them are on financial aid, yes.
Okay. And what's the average debt coming out of?
Well, when we look at the average debt, we look at the average debt because students can bundle in their undergraduate debt along with their baccalaureate debt, right, along with their medical school debt. So now it's about $175,000 to $200,000.
Okay. There are a number of debt forgiveness programs, aren't there? Or is at least one?
Yeah, the state, actually there are two that are run by the state. One of them is from the State Department of Health, called the Doctors Across New York program. And one is by the State Education Department, called the Regents Scholarship Program. Both of these have a quid pro quo. You'll get money back, but you have to work in an underserved area for a certain number of years. The Department of Health, which is the most...
Does that mean an underserved area of New York or an underserved area of the country?
Of New York.
Okay.
Of New York. These are state-funded programs, and the intent is to get kids to go to medical school, stay in New York. Because we do have a physician shortage problem here in New York. So the Department of Health's program provides $50,000 a year in loan forgiveness, and you have 5 years. You can, for up to 5 years, so that would cover your complete debt from medical school. The second part of their program, which is actually makes it very inviting, is that they also have a program where they'll provide $100,000, $50,000 a year for 2 years to help you set up a practice in an underserved area. So that is a very nice program for people who are really interested in one...
And not in going to an underserved area and staying there.
And staying there,
right.
yes. So
right.
you have to stay for 5 years, which some people don't want to do, but others, people go back to the communities that they came from.
Right.
So
now, is there a federal loan forgiveness program for medical schools, or is it all
Yes,
state?
there's the National Health Service Corps.
Okay.
And
okay.
they, too, you have to work in what the federal government has designated as an underserved area.
For years, there has been a dearth of medical school graduates who want to go into family practice, and I think maybe internal medicine as well. Is that still true? Is that still the case?
It is the case. It's changing, however. But, the number of primary care physicians the need for them continues to grow. When you look at the reimbursement that primary care physicians get from insurance companies, from the federal government, for Medicaid or for Medicare, it's really quite low, particularly considering the amount of debt that students have. So that's one
compared to the specialties.
Compared to the specialties.
Right.
Right. So students more and more choose to go into specialties.
What are the hot specialties these days?
Dermatology is always a very hot specialty.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't have an answer for that, but we used to call them the ologies: radiology, dermatology, pathology, anesthesiology. Those are the ones that are really the most lucrative when you get right down to it. They're the ones that, that sounded bad because I don't want to sound like medical students are only looking for the most lucrative. But when you look at it in terms of lifestyle, which is another issue, not being on call, not at all hours, and those are the things that make specialty more appealing. Yeah.
How about gynecology, obstetrics? Now, I mean, the issue there seemed to be malpractice.
Yes, malpractice insurance for those, and neurology, neurosurgery, the malpractice insurance can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it's just not worth it. There are some counties in New York that don't have gynecologists or obstetricians,
right?
Or the percentage per population is so very low, just because of the malpractice costs.
One of your missions is to stop the drain of New York doctors to other states.
Yes.
What efforts are in place to address that?
Well, it's not so much when you say doctors, people think of...
Is it more research type?
More researchers.
Okay.
What we're particularly concerned about now.
Okay.
What's happening is that through sequestration and other federal budget cuts, funding for NIH has decreased. And as funding for NIH decreased, New York State lost $100 million a year from cuts to NIH. Other states around the country have begun putting in funds from their state coffers to help support research within the states and to recruit researchers from other states to come to them to do their research. Now, New York has always been known as, on the cutting edge of research. We have 23 Nobel laureates in medicine and physiology that came out of New York State, more than any other state.
But is it losing that edge?
Definitely losing that edge.
To Texas?
To Texas, exactly. Texas has recruited 14 of our star researchers being defined as those who have NIH grants and awards. They're entrepreneurial and innovative in nature, so they've started startups and they've done discoveries that are leading towards new and interesting types of therapeutics.
And Texas just offers them more money, better facilities? What?
Texas put in $3 billion about 8 years ago towards cancer research. Of that, $248 million was earmarked to recruit researchers from out of state.
Ah, okay.
$40 million of that has gone to researchers from New York State. And in January, the new governor just made an announcement saying that he was going to put in $500 million just for the recruitment of scientists to come to Texas, to make the Texas state system the best in the country.
Yeah, yeah. And so obviously, I mean, you're pushing for the New York State legislature to
Yes.
fund recruitment.
Yes, we're asking that they put in $50 million a year, which, $50 million, it's nothing to sneeze at, obviously. It does not match what's going on in California, Texas, Florida. Indiana is putting in $25 million, and they have one medical school.
You got about a half minute left to give us your advice, your best advice for somebody who's interested in pursuing a career in medicine.
My best advice is to do what you're passionate about. I really think that that's very important. Medical school admissions are changing. More and more admissions committees are looking at the whole person. So my advice is to really do what you're passionate about and follow that passion. You know, we have done in the past a couple of mentoring minority medical student conferences, and we've had students come and talk to us about what some of the issues were getting into medical school. And often they would say, I was advised not to go. When I was in high school and I mentioned that I was interested in going into medicine, you know, the high school advisor said, oh, you can be a nurse or you can be a radiologist. You know, college, same thing. Find someone who you can meet up with, a mentor, a friend. Ask for programs that are going on, because medical schools and research institutions have programs for young people who are interested in going into medicine. Find them, stick with people who are interested and
people who are supportive of your goals.
Exactly.
I would think.
Exactly.
Fascinating. I mean, really, I didn't know much about New York State medical schools. Now I know more. We're out of time. I want to thank Joe Wiederhorn, president of the Associated Medical Schools of New York, for joining me today. For more information about this organization, you can go to amsny.org. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.